Well, end of life. You're right. I'm glad you brought that up because that's really important, I think, for brands when they're choosing a sustainable package. Just exactly what is the messaging that they want to give, and most of them want to land on the widest end of life destination possible.
Yeah, which
And
is designing for entropy, designing for escape.
Thanks to the advancing technology, which is light speed, right? I mean, if we think what we're capable of now versus 15 years ago when I started, we do deserve a lot of credit for what we've been able to achieve in a short period of time.
This episode of Roots to Fruits is produced and distributed by Be Connected, a social media management firm in Northeast Wisconsin.
Welcome to the Roots to Fruits podcast. We have a special show for you today where we are going to hover around the crossroads between being human and being in modern business and industry. Some people show up in your life like tuning forks. The moment you're around them, your whole nervous system settles into a deeper truth. You co-regulate nervous systems when you're together. Stuart McDonald has always been one of those people for me. He and I have both spent years trying to redesign the world of single-use packaging, pushing, improving compostable solutions, navigating systems engineered for incoherence and extraction, not regeneration. But Stuart isn't just a packaging mind. He's a yogi, a surfer, a spiritual human being who carries authenticity in a way that makes the rest of us sit up straighter. And that's where today's conversation is headed. Yes, we'll most likely talk about materials and brands and the future of waste systems. But we're also going to wander into the territory beneath all of that. The territory of soft power, coherence, identity, and what it actually means to live a regenerative life. Because the same systems that create plastics waste also create spiritual waste. And the same patterns that exhaust our soils exhaust our nervous systems. And the same courage it takes to be a regenerative leader is the same courage it takes to live authentically in a world that rewards the opposite. So today, Stuart and I are going to explore that whole spectrum, from soil to soul, from engineering to intuition, from surfing the ocean to surfing the energies of change. This one's going to be honest, warm, and wide open. So let's jump in. My guest, Stuart McDonald, has been in the sustainable materials for the last 15 years, when biopolymers were a niche curiosity to most enterprises. He currently works for a biotech company headquartered in France, specializing in enzymes that are deployed into polymer technologies designed to curb our addiction to these fossil-based plastics. His earliest vocation was in the merchant marines as a navigation officer. This fed his explorer mindset and deep love for the ocean. It's also where the alarm bells began to ring for Stuart on the extent of the plastic leakage around the globe. Welcome, Stuart McDonald, to this episode of the Roots to Fruits podcast.
Really good to be here, Kelly. It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. So why don't we start with a bit of that backstory of you, where you grew up, where you've been, where you've traveled?
Sure. Well, I mean, unsurprising to folks that join the Merchant Marine, I'm a prairie boy from Canada, far from bodies of water. But and I don't know if it's true about me, but it has been said that kids who grew up on the prairies were really good seafarers because they were accustomed to just these, uninterrupted horizons for their entire life, right?
That's interesting. Yeah, I see that.
But for me, it also satisfied an itch, right, to explore parts of the world that I had, I wasn't exposed to as a kid growing up in the prairies of Canada, and that was incredibly rewarding and enriching for me. Just because of the diversity, both in terms of the crew members that I served with, but also the diversity of cultures that I got to experience. And of course, the geography, when we hit land was always welcome and remarkable. And I truly did circumnavigate the globe for about 10 years in the service of the commercial fleets that I worked for. And, to bring this back to sustainability, certainly the peace and calm of the ocean, right? The awesome power and humbling power of the ocean really did feed my soul, right? And you mentioned in the introduction of my introduction, it was also at the same time very alarming and discouraging, right? To land in ports where there were so much plastic leakage. And even worse, thousands of miles from any shoreline, staring off the bridge wing on an early morning or late afternoon and catching in your field of vision plastic, Kelly. That sort of began, my desire to help rid the world of, or at least curb our appetite for fossil-based plastics. Hence my entry into sustainable films.
And so what actually got you into sustainable films? Was it a business that you started, or was it a company that you worked for? What actually got you into from there to the packaging?
I'll try and keep this short, but following the Merchant Marine, I did grad studies in maritime law, and that took me to working in industry in maritime law. And I was working in New York City, and I had this great opportunity to go to Canada to open up a marine insurance division nationwide. And, I'm in my 30s. Why wouldn't I take that opportunity? But at the same time, my brother, who had sold a company and had a 5-year non-compete that prevented him from going back into the industry, found a small plastics company in Canada that specialized in low volume, high margin products. He asked me to join, and I'll never forgive him for it, but I did. And I began to look for other product lines to augment our current product offering. And I came across a company called Morel Bioplastics, which was a joint venture between Archer Daniels Midland and Metabolics, and that was the first PHA that was approaching any kind of scale. And so that began my exposure to bioplastics, which then later expanded into soil biodegradable mulch film, and I then got exposure to and comfortable with PBAT based resins, which and a partnership with BASF. And then, the landscape started to really expand. What used to be, BASF, there were some PHA early entrants, Novamont's starch-based resins. These were the only players.
Yeah, it was a very nascent niche market.
Very much so. And since that time, we've seen new biopolymers come online, PBSA, and then combinations. Compounding became a thing, right? PBAT plus thermoplastic starch plus other modifiers. And really saw some innovation happening.
Let me make sure the audience knows what we're talking about. So PHA, for those of you that don't know, is a polymer made in the fat cells of microorganisms as they consume, for example, vegetable oils. So it's as natural of a polymer as it gets. So there's a lot of excitement about its potential because of its marine degradation, soil. It's everything degradable. PBAT is basically like a polyethylene alternative, but a material that is earth digestible versus turns into fossil microplastics. So just to give some people the background, and basically what we're trying to do is replace the fossil plastics that are in packaging today. And these are some of the early materials that started that process to where we are now, which I'd love to dig into as well, because I think you would agree. Technically, we've checked all the boxes of performance. That's not what's holding back adoption.
I agree with that. And I thought 5 years ago that we would be farther along than we are right now. And I think one of the important barriers to entry for whether it's QSRs, quick service restaurants, or um, larger brands who are looking to substitute their packaging with something more sustainable to meet whatever goals, sustainability or ESG goals, has been price. It is by an order of magnitude more expensive than polyethylene or polypropylene, which have been wonderful innovations. They have reduced weight for transportation. They have allowed for food safe materials to be transported easily and quickly. It's cheap. This is 70 years of innovation that we're catching up to as a young industry. And as a result, we've never been at scale. We've been waiting for that shoe to drop for such a long time. As a result, it's really expensive to make. And it's really expensive to make at low volumes. But what I'm seeing right now, which is really encouraging, is a price compression. The motivations can differ, right? Scale is part of it, but also, competitive pressure to keep or capture market share. Regardless of the motivation, it's here. We are closing the delta between maybe not virgin polyolefins, but certainly recyclable plastics, post-consumer recycling or chemical recycling. We're closing the distance between those, making it far easier to adopt. And so that's what gets me excited about the next 5 years for bioplastics.
And look, this is not a journey. This is an adventure, because we spend so much time trying to solve technical challenges that couldn't even be fully defined. You look at where brands were with such severely over-engineered fossil-based plastic packaging that, a bag of chips, as I've said before, you've heard me say before, a bag of chips has no business going to Mars and back and still being
right. Yeah,
but that's what
absolutely.
we've designed. So basically, packaging has become almost like a way to unitize the economics of food over production, and it's a difficult thing to reverse from. So we do everything right. We prove all of these technical performances work. They run on machines. They do all these great things. And price, I think, in a lot of ways, is a hide behind. I think there's a deeper psychological problem that I want to dig into with you, because we both seen it together, separately, and that is what's really holding them back isn't technical performance. It isn't price. It's fear. It's absolute fear, in my opinion, and not just fear, but it's fear across the whole value chain. So we hear a lot about we need to reduce fear. I think the real challenge is we have to restore trust between people, because our authenticity is at an all-time low. And that's what I've always admired about you, Stuart, is you're authentic. Your words match your feelings. You don't hide it. So when people do that, our nervous systems pick up on that lack of authenticity. And we can apply that same thing to industry. Our industry, I think, is stuck in that same dilemma. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on what's holding the industry back psychologically.
Golly, that's a big question. And I think fear is a component of that, and there's some legitimate fear, right? I mean, products that are purposeful, products that fit compostable packaging are single-use packaging that is protecting food. And that's a great deployment of bioplastics. If it has touched food, then its recycling value is so very low. But so the fear component for brands might be, and I'm not a brand, but it might be that food safety is a barrier for them to launch at large scale. And it's not valid. We've been working very hard, and with large brands as well, who have significant R&D budgets to solve for X, right? Solve for the food safety concern. You need moisture barrier to prevent your food from drying out, and you need oxygen barrier to prevent fungus and germs to grow on your food. We've got that figured out in the same way that the polyolefin industry did as well, right? So
In
the
some cases,
technology is
better.
similar.
Thinner.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Yeah.
So certainly that's one example that comes to mind for me. A fear about protecting their product, a fear about supply chain, right? Fear about it lasting the cycle that brands have, I think, imposed upon themselves, which are unrealistic. And that goes back to your analogy about packaging should never be, designed to go to Mars and back. So should the shelf life or supply chain, right? That could be compressed as well to accommodate bioplastics.
And what you and I both experienced together, and again, separately over the last, 7-8 years we've known each other, is what is shelf life? Brands are still trying to figure out what that means, because what they know is that their current product goes on a shelf. It doesn't go bad. It spends months in distribution before it gets to that shelf. And all that matters is that shelf never goes empty. So there's so much cascading overproduction from food manufacturing to packaging manufacturing to packaging food manufacturing to cascade it forward to make sure that shelf is never empty, because it's such a long path from beginning to end. So I think we got so much waste in the system, no one really knows what's good enough.
Well, and also the larger the brand, the more bureaucratic it may become. And I think of, the legal departments of many brands unwilling to move the goalpost a little bit to accommodate a shorter supply chain requirement. But I also think of a brand that I'm working with right now that has this still has maintained a very entrepreneurial, problem-solving mindset, and they ain't small. They're privately held, but they're a $500 million company now. So they're becoming a mature organization. And yet the philosophy and ethos there of let's figure it out, right? Let's break stuff. And it has been a tremendous success for them, becoming one of the number one brands in their space.
That's the challenge, right? We both experience it within because everybody's getting bigger, and that goes against where we need to be going. We need to be distributed. Localized circularities, managing supply chains, not as some big centralized coast-to-coast distribution model. You got to think smaller game. So when they look at alternative options, there's so much. It's really easy to be obsessed with all the things that could go wrong or could happen. It keeps people kind of paralyzed. Yet.
And that, I want to just carry on with, a point here. We've talked about, as an example, large CPGs, consumer products groups, and smaller and medium-sized enterprises. And I'm, if you talked to me 2 years ago, I was really enthusiastic about large brands taking the risk, making it happen, going first, right, to have fast followers adopt, their technology, and that would improve, scale, compress pricing. The world is amazing, and we're on our way to sustainable materials in everyday packaging. That, there are some macroeconomic pressures on these guys over the last couple of years, right? Inflation, changing consumer demand towards healthier foods, right? The Maha movement right now that is encouraging natural flavors and colors right here in the United States. California has moved towards that legislation that demands it. There are a lot of headwinds that prevent large CPGs at the moment of taking the leap, both in terms of cost, right, and changing the way that they do business or look at packaging. But I am very, very encouraged, right, about the small and medium-sized enterprises that, exhibit the attributes that I just described of the brand that I, was previously talking about, which is going to carry us through, right? The biopolymer industry, which is going through some turbulence right now. I think we're coming into 2026 in a really good spot.
I think so too. And we're going to get into paper and how that factors in too. But I think, one of the challenges is, my estimates, because there's no real hard data, but my estimates are somewhere around 25,000 brands just in the United States alone that are considered small or medium size. And you've got a reducing number of manufacturers of packaging that are getting bigger. So a $2 billion packaging manufacturer can't take the order for someone who's a $5 million brand. So you're actually seeing some disconnect between those who want friendlier ecological solutions versus what they can get. But I feel like that's with the larger brands, and I want to get your thoughts on this. We know a couple of them that do believe in this, and they're showing us a lot of truth about ourselves and how they're helping dislodge this momentum. But I think there's another layer to this for these larger brands, in that they for them to take on that, they almost need the smaller brands to prove it out. Like they need somebody else to bring it to market and prove it works, because there's too many. But what I think it comes down to is, again, that fear and trust problem that they're going to have with accepting that we can move with new material science. They're stuck, almost like we're trying to grease the wrong tracks to move that forward. And I don't know. I feel like it comes back to that. There's just too many reasons to say not yet. But the other point I was going to say, with these regulations, I kind of feel like, I'm curious your thoughts on this, that we're kind of going to Europe a little bit in the way each state is going to have its own requirements. And to be a coast to coast brand, you're going to have to treat each state like a different country that speaks the same language.
Well, yeah, there's an old adage in the waste management industry that trash is local, right? And here in the United States, right, we have 50 little fiefdoms that get to decide what they do from an environmental perspective, right? We have the EPA, but which is national, right? But states are pretty much able to govern what they're going to do with their waste. So that's municipal solid waste, MSW, that's recyclable material. And then that's also compostable material as well. Some states are more robust than others. California, the Pacific Northwest, Minnesota, the Northeast, right? New England, are beginning to build systems to take in earth digestible. I love that. I love that expression that you've coined, materials, right? For and identified as a proper recyclable material.
And earth digestible is it's because no one, and I think one of the large brands, which we can say by name, they're publicly about it. You know them, I know them, is PepsiCo. And PepsiCo believes they're not trying to make sure their bags get composted. They're designing for litter. They understand that there's entropy in the system, both human and system. And that we can't even design flexible packaging to stay in one piece. We open up a bar wrapper and the corner tears off. Like, we're taking 1.8 trillion units of flexible packaging globally and almost doubling it because we don't even know how to design it to stay in one piece.
That's a good point. Well, end of life. You're right. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's really important, I think, for brands when they're choosing a sustainable package, just exactly what is the messaging that they want to give. And most of them want to land on the widest end of life destination possible.
Yeah. Which is designing for entropy, designing for escape.
Thanks to the advancing technology, which is light speed, right? I mean, if we think what we're capable of now versus 15 years ago when I started,
Mm-hmm.
We do deserve a lot of credit for what we've been able to achieve in a short period of time, we as an industry. And one of those achievements, one of those innovations, is a wider end of life destination for products, which includes soil and like backyard compostable and even marine degradable.
And even there, so this one brand, PepsiCo, is kind of forcing the supply chain, the industry, to work together to solve these big problems. And what do we learn from that? At the beginning, we didn't play very well together. And I always, being a yogi, I was excited to have you on because you're a fellow yogi. I use chakras as both a development path, but also a measuring tape. So root, sacral, you go up to the crown, energy transitions right here in the heart. But we start with root. So by 10 years old, your root chakra is formed. So your sense of security, how well you adapt to unforeseen things that happen. Do you adapt with grace and experience, or do you fight, flee, or fawn, right?
Sure.
Our industry is like a 6-year-old. Our industry, NDAs, non-competes, we don't share information. We're always blacking out names. We're not truthful about what we're doing and why. And it creates this lack of trust because we're not transparent. We're always protecting and it's like, why are we protecting pieces of pie when there's not even a pie on the table yet? So I feel like the brand is kind of proving some of the problems that we have in working together as a value chain from beginning to the end. There's lack of trust, lack of connection. As we're trying to take a long extractive line of how we take, extract, make, throw away.
Dispose.
We're trying to form a circle out of it and wonder why it's not working.
Yeah. We need to interrupt that linear model to something more regenerative and circular. And I want to comment just real quick on non-competitive collaboration, which, you've correctly identified as like key. I saw that for a while, and then I'm like seeing a little bit of retreat. And I think that might be a byproduct of the technology and innovations becoming more settled, right, and known, and the traditional impulse or reflex is to protect what you've made is probably resurfacing a little bit. But it's still there, and it's, folks on the periphery, right, have a responsibility to share what they've learned in as general a way as possible, or as specific as preferable.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know. I feel like until we can, package, if you take the entirety of food, there aren't that many combinations of materials required to do it. Yeah, we've got millions of combinations of materials. So I don't know if it's a reluctance to just simplify the game so that we can do the right thing, or it's the fact that it's up to the 50 states, the 1979 law, the RCRA law, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, 1979. Congress basically said 50 states, it's your problem. And I don't see that changing until we have the equivalent of 9/11, until we have some climate event so powerful that it triggers the Office of Sustainability to be created to normalize this. I don't see it. I see it being still a very, very much an adventure.
And I think we're not moving away from any kind of national or we're not moving any closer to any national harmonization at all. And we have to live with the reality of that the states decide what they do. But more and more states are beginning to embrace recycling technologies, right, to divert waste from landfill, right? States that have more land are less likely, than states where land is a premium, like California or the Pacific Northwest, where it's really expensive to have a big hole in the ground.
That's right.
So it's going to be fragmented, and policy, public demand will be driving adoption as much as the technology will.
So we have all of these like systemic issues. We've got size problems. We've got cascading waste. It's almost nauseating, right? How many things that are in the mix that we're trying to unravel, reshape, reconnect, when at the end of the day, this is still very much a human problem. And one of the reasons I want to have you on the show is because you are such an authentic human being that I've ever met. Like I said, your words match your feelings. And I know that it's frustrating when you're trying to carry that authenticity forward. You find where there's people you resonate with within the companies you're trying to work with. So there are companies that absolutely, truly believe in those ethos. They want to be better. They want to be more sustainable. But the equity that owns them is not motivated to do the right thing. So there's a lot of even the companies that I think really genuinely do, are the people that we work with do. So how do you break through that? How do you carry, and you're a very spiritual person in the sense of individualization, being at peace with yourself, the surrender, all the things we're trained as yogis. You embody that. And also being, if I don't mind bringing this up, because I think it's really important, being a gay man and a white gay man, Canadian white gay man in American industry, it's tough, right? So I want to hear some of your, like, what have you learned along the way, and how do you carry that spiritual balance with you forward, and how do we get others to learn that a lot of what's holding them back is just simply letting their fascia breathe?
Sure. So we're going there. No, that's great, and thank you for allowing me to speak on this subject. I think at the moment we're talking about authenticity, right? That took a while for me. Separating my professional life from my personal life. In my personal life, I was able to live as an authentic gay man, for quite some time, but in my professional life, that took a while. Certainly, like in my mind, I feel like I've achieved a measure of success professionally. Whether others think so, I don't know. But for me, I think I have. It has come at some significant personal cost. It it you know For me, there were decades of having to code shift, decades of being in the closet to climb up the ladder. There were doors that were open that I had to evaluate and decide, oh gosh, I can't go through that, because if I am authentic, the opportunity would close for me. So I've made decisions based on the fact that have been hard for me, based on the fact that I'm gay. But I mean, over the course of my professional life, there were incremental opportunities to be more authentic. And I can say it's a happy ending, right? That I do now get to lead an authentic life, both professionally and personally. And the tragedy, if I could say, is that, I've now learned that by showing yourself, your complete self, the world gets to respond with validation about what is true about you. It doesn't always, but when it does, for me, it satisfies this deep personal longing from within to be authentic. And that was a late revelation for me. But it is what it is. I'm a product of the 90s, I've hired kids now, and I'm around kids, Gen Z, millennials, certainly in the state that I live in and some of the states that I've lived in. See no barrier to entry to live an authentic life, and I think that's just amazing, and it's wonderful, right?
Absolutely agree more.
Get to live
very refreshing, isn't it?
No, it truly is, yeah. Right? But it's like old guys like me that had to pave the way a little bit for them, and that oral history, and sincerely, thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak briefly on this subject. Or oral history is pretty important for our community to hear.
And it's
so thanks.
I'm gonna guess something. You tell me if I'm correct or not, but because I know I can relate to it from, and I can't exactly pinpoint where I felt this energy transition for me personally, but when you are authentic, there's something else that triggers inside of you, which is your coherence, because your words match your feelings. So now when you're authentic, the whole concept of vulnerability changes. You're not being vulnerable. You're just speaking your truth. And you almost grow taller from it. Like weight's removed from you when you just surrender to that truth. I'm just being myself. Take it or leave it. And people appreciate that. I notice more and more. It resonates with more people. Authenticity is, I think, a key gateway to growth, to change, to surfing the ocean, to surfing the energy of change is authenticity.
Well, and also, the other shoe to drop for me, right, was contentment. And for me, contentment, uh, the building blocks of that are passion, love, and integrity. And, you bring up, the love of the ocean. For me, passion is a meta emotion. You have to have joy to have passion. And to have joy, I think you have to be a bit vulnerable, right? Open to receive it. And when you find it, right, the idea is to repeat it and be willing to repeat what makes you feel joyful. And that, I think, is the culmination of what I define as passion, right? Whether that's passion for surfing or passion for speaking about sustainable materials, right? And changing hearts and minds, in the business space, in our professional endeavors. That is a passion. So that's an important factor for me, for contentment. Love, I mean, yes, love for your partner. And what is that? Maybe that's shared values, right? That's a deep emotional connection. But I also believe that is, love those attributes of love can be, expressed to friends and even professional relationships, right? And that's a key component. And then, of course, living in integrity. And integrity is tied to authenticity.
That's right. Truth,
right?
Living your truth, right?
Living your truth.
Because when you live your truth, something else happens, right? You can love yourself. And when you love yourself, you're now able to love others. And not romantically or that way. I'm talking about that sense of belonging. I think we get the word love wrong. Right. It's that biological drive for harmony and coherence amongst all living things.
Sure.
And you don't make that connection when you're masking it with performance and incoherent layers. Lack of,
I'd as a gay man, and I want to talk about what I would attribute some of the things that we've talked about as feminine qualities. And I don't mean that disparaging at all, but I mean, this ability, right, to forge deep connections, to forge emotional bonds, right, to seek out people with shared values. When I say feminine, I'm not talking about adopting any gender nonconforming roles or painting your nails, right? But it's attracting these attributes and seeking them in others, right? Particularly, I feel for straight guys in a way, because they have this, like, they're under the weight of this version of masculinity that society demands of them, and it's unachievable and quite cruel, right? Mm-hmm. That anyone, straight or gay, right, could be denied like the true attributes that make us content and happy and connected to our fellow human beings, mm-hmm. right? And so I mean, I gravitate to people like you. We share values, and I deeply respect you. And through the course of our friendship over the 7 and 8 years, I feel an emotional bond with you. And that, I think I don't know why I didn't lead with that, but I mean, you're a perfect example of, the love that I feel for another brother. And I just think that we need more of that, and we need to seek more of that. Right.
And I feel like it's there. I feel like our nervous systems we're biologically engineered for coherence, and we're in a world that is discouraging it, and it builds up. And I call it's like we need to compost that residual grief in our souls so we can breathe taller. And until we compost that grief into truth, so when you and I share your truth, I'm merely metabolizing it. I'm not judging it. And we tend to judge people's truth versus just simply metabolizing it. I think it's a compost. Carbon starts in the compost.
I love that. I love the segue back. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I feel like being authentic is the contagion that we want. And I think this younger generation gives me hope.
And there's a serenity in authenticity, and I think in management too. Particularly with startups, in any industry, in any segment of industry, and in business, right? There can be chaos and disruption, right? And if you lead an authentic life, and again, it's the world reflects that back to you. There's a possibility, right, for calm, right, and leadership, right, and bringing serenity into the workplace is, I think, critical to a happy and productive crew, right, who are bombarded with chaos and uncertainty, and that's one of the attributes of all business.
You said something really important right there, is that even the most content, coherent, authentic person in the world that we live in, there's just those days you're just weighted down. It's hard to maintain that in today's environment.
For sure. Yeah.
So,
I mean,
somehow you got to maintain it. Part of maintaining it for me is the contagion with others, like building that coherent squared, building more. It gives me hope, keeps me positive.
Well, I mean, hey, listen, you brought it up. Don't forget, right? Practices like yoga, right? And meditation and mindfulness, right? Quieting the mind, sitting on your surfboard, waiting for the next wave, right? That feeling of up and down with the swell. I mean, we need to seek these out to live balanced lives.
Every moment we have to do that. What do we do with it? We fill it with phone scrolls and we're not taking the time to fill the mind.
There should be incorporated, and my humble opinion, and you don't have to take my word for it, but there has to be I believe, for me, right, if I do not incorporate a practice of stillness or meditation, right, and I do that in my yoga practice, I'm a real big fan lately of yin, which is, holding on to compressions for 5 minutes. It requires, you to focus on your body, and that can be very meditative, right? There's an opportunity for mindfulness in that 5 minutes.
And you've been in my hot power class, but you've never been in one of my yin classes. That would be fun.
No, I haven't been. And look, for sure, vinyasa, right, which is about strength, and yin, which is more about mindfulness, right? These are amazing tools in our toolbox.
Absolutely.
I prefer it. I'm not trying to get people to sign up for a yoga class, but it is beneficial. I mean, it's thousands of years of practice.
It's part of metabolizing the daily grief, right? That's the way I look at it.
Absolutely.
So you said something
and to go back to, like, I know we have a theme here, right? These are regenerative practices for us, right?
That's right.
Very much the same as as the materials that we've chosen to hitch our wagon to, which are regenerative. This is a comparison that I choose to make.
Yeah, I agree, and I stopped calling compost is not the end of life. Compost is where carbon renews. It's the renewal.
Indeed. Yeah, great point.
But something I want to share with you and see what you think of it. I feel like it might be something that helps everybody if they realize this about themselves. And no blame, just something to acknowledge about yourself. I do it, and but I do it when I notice it when I do it, is that when you're talking to somebody and they're sharing their truth with you, there's that industry kind of bred in us from the 90s to be performative, to have a really clever response or a smart, like we're preparing what we're going to say versus being reverberant and taking the time to process what we just heard, what we just absorbed. And when you see it in people when you're exchanging with them, are they being reverberant? Or are they preparing for being performative? And when those people come back later, having thought about the results of the metabolizing that truth that you shared, is always a good sign of their authenticity. So I feel like there are some clues and ways to improve ourselves or to improve our interactions with others, is to look for that performative reverberant side.
Well, and I think, that performative a component that sometimes we can sniff out is insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
Insecurity about the maybe the product or the subject that you're responsible for. Your place in the value chain, right? I think some experience, right, and learned experience helps minimize that, or it diffuses away, right? I have insecurity, right? It shows up for me sometimes as well. And one of our defenses is to be performative and mask that. But the more your lived experience, the more you've been a part of the industry that you're in, it's seniority, right? It takes some time, and it becomes less performative and more authentic. But I think time is a factor there.
I'm curious what you think of this. I feel like there's so many people out there, whether it's their job, in their jobs, in their roles, what they're being asked to do is essentially carry out what their nervous systems would consider to be incoherent actions. And it weighs on them. So there's a lot of performative people that are just trying to survive in the incoherent system that they've been placed in. That their raw, coherent energy is about belonging. So that empathy, that feminine side that they want to be a part of something greater than themselves is there, but they can't express it. It's locked away through the performance of the expectations for whatever their role is. So I feel like there's just a lot of coherent bodies stuck in incoherent conditions.
Indeed. And, maybe that's just a fact of life in the professional position or that they're in, or the vocation that they're in. And, listening to you describe that, and there's truth in that. For me, I began to think about, the balance that we need to have in our lives, right? There's the job that we go to 9 to 5, or however the time consuming that it is. It's really important to find balance in that in your personal life, so that you can come back to work reset, but also you can leave it at work when you come home and reset. And so some activity to help you get back to equilibrium, I think, is really important. For me, again, it's meditation, right? It's
And
other.
so you didn't grow up a surfer, you grew up on the plains. So when did you start surfing exactly? When did that
So
happen?
I used to live in New York. My in-laws have a beach house on Long Island, about 12 miles away from one of the most iconic longboard surf spots in Montauk, at the very east end of Long Island. And I was in my 40s, early 40s, when I took like 2 weeks off of work, which was unheard of for me. It was always these bite-sized chunks. And we'd come out for the weekend, right? It's a 2.5 hour train ride away from Manhattan. But so then I decided, well, in these 2 weeks, I'm going to learn how to surf. And I got a coach. Corey's Wave was the name of the surf school, and they're still in existence. So shout out to them. They got me surfing. And that began, a lifelong love affair. And it's not hard. It's not hard. Anyone who gets on a board for the first time and stands up, pops up, is hooked. And so that really took on a fanaticism when I moved to Los Angeles, and I'm 23 minutes away from my current, home break.
Love it.
And now it's incorporated in my daily routine. I will say, just kind of fun, I love to surf early in the morning. I love to be the first one, in the lineup, dawn patrol. I can't do that working for the French now, because it's the end of their day and the beginning of mine, right? So, working for the French has really messed with my morning routine, but I will find the time to do it. And then, from that has given me some ability to, go to other surf spots around the world, Latin America, Asia. So I seek it when I have time to find it.
You hear a lot of talk about the word mindfulness, and And I think everyone has a different interpretation, but essentially you found your balance of mindfulness, something that keeps you sane, keeps your nervous system regulated, keeps your HRV, your heart rate variation is high and controllable. I mean, that's what we have to do because it is a tough world and it's a lot of scary stuff going on, and our nervous systems are not designed for what we experience and see on a daily basis. So we got to find some way to keep electrically balanced, you know?
Well, make no mistake, it didn't come naturally to me. It's a skill, and skills have to be practiced, and incorporated. And I'm not perfect, man. It took me a long time, and I meditated today for the selfish reason that I wanted to be somewhat, ready for you. But there are days that go by and I don't. But when I don't do it, I realize I show up differently, and so that's for me, right? I mean, meditation could be gardening. Right? Meditation could be pruning flowers. Meditation could be walks. Meditation can be a lot of different things. It doesn't necessarily mean sitting in the lotus position. But there are practices where you get to settle your mind and calm your mind. And
It's like it's moving.
that's
It's
really,
moving meditation, right? You're moving meditation,
yep, absolutely.
and I feel
Absolutely.
like a lot of people are missing the opportunity to experience that because they always have earbuds in. So podcasts are great. Music is a great tool to decompress and get to a new place, but sometimes we just need stillness, right?
Yep.
And nothing is better than to find yourself stuck between thoughts with nowhere to be. And what happens, right? Things come to you. You figure things
Sure they
out
do.
when
Yep.
you quiet the mind.
Yeah. And for me, my worst enemy is myself, right? My ego, right? Um, by, by, by meditating, right. I move away from that, right? That myself is my worst enemy, right? By meditating, you get a little awareness, right? You get a little distance, from that. And you just get to be quiet. Quiet that lizard brain, that downstairs brain, right?
Quiet that lizard brain. Yes.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. What I'm hoping people get from this episode is that we're all wired for coherence. Your nervous system is wired for what you and I have every time we meet. It's like we saw each other yesterday. And it's so fulfilling. My nervous system is fulfilled when I interact with people like you, Stuart. And I think it's because of that authenticity. And I don't think anybody would openly admit that they have no interest in being that. I think everybody wants to be.
Absolutely.
So hopefully they can take a few things away from this episode to try. And if not, I'm easy to find, kellywilliams.me. You can email me, you can reach out to me multiple ways, follow me on the podcast, the YouTube channel, and again, easy to find and find out more about how to create your own path to authenticity. So, any last thoughts or comments or things to share with the audience?
Well, no, I other than, I appreciate your introduction and allow me to return the favor. Iron sharpens iron. And for me, the sum of me are the people that I surround myself with. And you are one of those people that enriches my lives. And I look at you just on a number of different planes as a spiritual mentor and as a subject matter expert that has no equal in our industry. It's truly a pleasure to spend any time with you. And so I do appreciate, the invitation to join. I wouldn't have missed it. And I just wanted to express gratitude and a sincere thank you for allowing me to spend some time with you today.
Thank you. That means a lot to me, Stuart. It really does. And something I'm going to do for you, I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to start doing some chakra meditation. So maybe when I'm ready, I'll give you one and see.
Throw them my way.
Well, with that, Stuart, I can't thank you enough. Like I said, you're reverberant, you're authentic, you're a genuine human being. And if more people modeled themselves after you, we would be a much happier, safer place. So with that, I'm honored to have you on. Much appreciated. And go hit some waves today sometime.
Today's a bad day, but I will say one last thing. It's been raining here, right? So the rule of thumb is don't go in the water for 3 days because it is Los Angeles County, and
lots of stuff
you know,
flowing out there, right?
lots of stuff dumping into the water. But thanks for the encouragement. I'll take you up on that as soon as possible.
And we'll end like we usually do. Bond soft, build strong. I'm your host, Kelly Williams, with Roots to Fruits podcast.
Thanks for tuning into Roots to Fruits. If this conversation resonated, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and share it with someone who's ready to grow with us. Let's build something lasting together.